Since the release of Marvel's Avengers, reviews from critics have been mixed. However, one of the most common comments about the game are the ones comparing it to the video game Anthem. Developed by BioWare, Anthem was a live service game that preceded Avengers, and it wasn't critically received well either. Recently, BioWare announced that there would be no new content released for their game, declaring that it would be abandoned by the development team. From an outsider's perspective, somebody who's played Avengers but hasn't played Anthem, I can definitely see the comparisons, but I don't think that the games are the same. So, in today's video, I'm going to explain why I don't think that Avengers is the next Anthem, but I'm also going to explore the comments of players and professional critics to find out why people think the games or their trajectory is so similar. And we'll see if their comments can change my perspective.
Stars and Stripes!
Hello and welcome to another Carrot Scraps video, and by another, I mean the 54th. So I've been asked by my Twitch chat since before Avengers came out if Avengers would be like Anthem. After playing the beta and streaming my footage, this was a super frequent question that I would get. And my answer was regularly no. I didn't think that Avengers was the next Anthem, and I honestly don't think it is now. But why don't I think it's the next Anthem? Well, for two simple reasons. Welcome to the Two Simple Reasons Club. You're all the new members of a club I created called the Two Simple Reasons Club, and it's about Avengers not being Anthem. I'm gonna get on with my point. Anyway, I only have two reasons why I think that Avengers isn't the next Anthem. The first has to do with the intellectual properties of the two games, and the second has to do with downloadable content. So let's get into the first point. My number one reason for why the two games were different was when you would compare their intellectual properties. The developer of Anthem, BioWare, is a juggernaut in the video game industry. When they make games, they sell. That being said, Anthem was a brand new intellectual property. While I personally love the idea of creating a new mythology, and while there is a certain mystique that sells a title like that, I can't deny that there's a bit of an uphill battle when you're selling the first title in a new franchise. And it's a little bit different with BioWare because as a developer, they have fans. And fans and non-fans can look at BioWare's release history of previous games and kind of guess what Anthem could be based on previous quality. But there's a reason we get so many sequels and remakes and reboots and soft reboots, and it's because there's an established audience already. When you're making a product based on a previously established intellectual property, you have a built-in fan base that will buy whatever you're selling immediately. That doesn't mean that it's impossible to sell a product that doesn't have a fan base already ingrained in it, but it does make it more difficult. Avengers, on the other hand, is a game based on characters from the Marvel Comics publishing giant. Characters that have existed for over 50 years and who are celebrated in pop culture now more than ever. You see, if both games, Anthem and Avengers, underperformed financially, or if both player bases deplete, I think that the developers and companies that own each game would value an established intellectual property like Marvel superheroes over a new IP like Anthem. Let's be clear, abandoning either game is a huge loss. They worked on Anthem for over 6 years from what I could tell. But I think the mindset is that you can either more easily salvage an established IP, or there's more of an investment in an established IP. I could easily see the argument that giving up on Avengers would be a waste of the license, while giving up on Anthem could be seen as cutting your losses. Plus, again, the characters from the Avengers video game are more popular than ever. You could argue that even if the Avengers game underperforms, that every time a Marvel Cinematic Universe film comes out, that at least some people are going to look at the game and consider it. There's no other alternative media bringing new people back to Anthem, though. So that's my first argument for why I think Avengers is different from Anthem. Approaching the potential failure of both games from this mindset is most likely how I think the companies funding these games would react. With Avengers, there's just more of an investment, there's more ways to save it, and there's more ways to promote it. Whereas with Anthem, if the public loses interest in it, there's very little ways you can revive it. At least from a corporate perspective, that is. Anyway, let's move on to my second point. DLC. While many detractors and even fans of Marvel's Avengers have criticized the delayed release of post-game downloadable content, I think this is another detail that separates the two games. So keep in mind, I haven't really played Anthem, and as a result, I'm not really a fan of the game. So my knowledge on DLC and expansion content in the game is very limited. But from what I can tell from my research, Anthem did not have a lot of post-game content or downloadable content that was released in the future. The only exception to this that I could find is Cataclysm, which was an in-game event for Anthem that came out in August of 2019. August of 2019, when the game came out in January of 2019. If I understand this correctly, and that is the only DLC content that was actually released for the game, that's a huge gap. From what I understand, Cataclysm was supposed to come out sooner, but because of the poor state of Anthem at release, developers had to fix a lot of the problems with the game before they could perfect the DLC. Now again, I did do research, and from my research, Cataclysm was the only DLC expansion, but it's possible that there were other expansions either before or after, but I'm going to stick with the logic that my research yielded. On the other hand, while Avengers had a slow DLC release process, the game did receive its first DLC expansion in December of 2020. And as a reminder, Avengers first debuted in September of 2020. That's significantly less time than Cataclysm took to release. In addition, we're about to see the second DLC expansion for Avengers with Clint Barton, only a handful of months after the first DLC release. Now, we don't know for sure if there's more DLC coming to Avengers in the future, but already Avengers has received more DLC updates post-release than Anthem ever did. But I think the comparison is especially significant when comparing the timetable of these two games. Avengers also had issues at launch, but clearly they were able to fix those issues and release their DLC content faster than Anthem ever did. Not to mention the fact that the Avengers development team had to deal with COVID, whereas Anthem did not. Again, we don't know for sure if new content is coming after Clint Barton, but given the amount of content we've gotten so far, and given what the development team says, I genuinely think we're getting new DLC characters for the rest of the year. And if that's the case, we'll continue to get more content than Anthem ever got. So again, I don't think that the two games are comparable when it comes to downloadable content. Yes, Avengers downloadable content is slow, but it is coming out, and it's coming out more frequently than it did with Anthem, and there doesn't seem to be any sign of stopping anytime soon. So those are my two main arguments for why I don't think that Avengers is the next Anthem. But as I've said numerous times already, I've never really played Anthem, and I don't really have that hands-on experience. So in the interest of fairness, I wanted to hear from players of Anthem, and also critics and reviewers of Anthem, to see what qualities other people think Anthem and Avengers share. So we're moving out of the 2-point club, or whatever the club I made earlier, and we're going into the counter club, the counter argument club. This club is it's a brand new club that I created, debut club. It's for counter arguments only, not the two argument. What did I call it earlier? So we're going to split this into two sections. I found a handful of articles that compare Avengers to Anthem, both pre and post release of Avengers. Articles that are posted on Den of Geek, Game Rant, and Screen Rant. Are Screen Rant and Game Rant the same entity? And the second part of this will be me talking about players of Anthem and how they feel about the game. I made a post on Twitter, on r Anthem the game, and on r Play Avengers, asking what similarities players thought existed between Avengers and Anthem. I got the most response from the Anthem the game subreddit. Strangely enough, Play Avengers, I got no response, so I hope that doesn't mean bad things for the subreddit. Anyway, let's start with the comments that I found in the articles that I read. So I'm going to go over a short list of attributes that these articles drew comparisons to. Most of the articles I saw were very focused on how Avengers and Anthem don't have visible gear systems. I saw this mentioned multiple times. Many of these articles take the time to mention that the whole point of looter shooters for most people is showing off your gear and visually changing your appearance. And reading these criticisms, I can definitely say that I've heard this a lot before and after the release of Avengers. As I've said many times, I haven't really played many looter shooter games, so this criticism is a little foreign to me, but I can definitely understand it. So hearing that altering your appearance in these games is kind of expected is really interesting to me. Even without being a part of it, I can definitely understand from an outsider's perspective why it could be more engaging to interact with a game where you can show off your progression rather than not having a way to visibly show off your progression at all. Now, I think the main reason for both games not having visible loot is because they also sell, visible cosmetic transactions. And if they had visible loot, it's possible that less people would purchase these cosmetic transactions. But either way, visible loot seems to be an issue for a lot of these articles. Endgame variety is also criticized in these articles, specifically talking about how mission variety is very dull when you finish the main story. Den of Geek also says that Avengers and Anthem are similar because playing single player is not as fun as playing multiplayer, and given the player base, multiplayer is bound to be more scarce. Screen Rant also mentions that you don't feel like a superhero. This is a criticism that I think is kind of weird to me. They compare how in Anthem you can't fly indefinitely and how you can overheat and have that ability taken away from you. And then in Avengers, how your superpowers can kind of be taken away by certain enemies. And it's mentioned basically that they don't like not feeling empowered and they don't like not feeling like super in those moments. I also saw this lightly touched on in the Game Rant article. Is this the same person? Nope, two different people. Cool. So I don't necessarily agree with that, but you know, these aren't my points. These are other people's points. And on a separate note, Den of Geek also compares Avengers to Tetris, which is interesting because in my Avengers review, I said that I thought that Avengers was like a really good arcade game. And I consider Tetris to be an arcade game, so I thought that was a really interesting comparison. Anyway, from that short collection of articles that compare Avengers to Anthem, those were the main points of comparison from what I can tell. So with that out of the way, let's talk about how players felt that Anthem and Avengers are similar. By checking the various social media posts that I made, here's a short list of qualities that these players felt the two games shared. The first criticism is bad business decisions and the live service model for video games. I saw a couple of people bring this up and specifically mentioned that the live service model is anti-consumer. It really does seem like a lot of players really dislike this aspect of video games. I couldn't get any real reasons why Avengers and Anthem are compared more frequently than Avengers and other live service games, like The Division or Fallout 76 or Destiny. But from what I can tell, the main thing that brings Avengers and Anthem closer together in comparisons is their dysfunctional nature at launch and their bugs and glitches. It seemed that many people linked these two details, that the unfinished appearance of these games went hand in hand with the live service model for the game. Moving on, another criticism I saw is the silent development team. Players of Anthem felt like they didn't get enough communication from the development team, and they recognized this happening in Avengers as well. And this is something that I've talked about in my Avengers review and on my streams, that I definitely think that communication from Crystal Dynamics could be a little bit better. And so I could totally see this happening with BioWare as well. The next point is the quick decline of the player base. Many posters mentioned that the player base dwindled really fast in both games. The next criticism is that both games needed better repeatable content, and we saw that mentioned in the articles that I talked about earlier. A lot of people were saying that they needed more mission variety and a better gameplay loop. I'd also like to quickly mention microtransactions. Surprisingly, I didn't really see people mention this, but while I think that microtransactions are a common part of modern AAA video games, I do think that it's possible that players also make comparisons to the two games by comparing their microtransaction shops. And for my brief research, I could say that both microtransaction shops kind of leave the player asking for a little bit more. I think prices are higher in the Avengers marketplace, but I also think that the Anthem marketplace has declined in price over time. And while I want more variety from the Avengers marketplace, I still think that that marketplace has way better skins than from what I've seen in Anthem. So they kind of even out when it comes to criticism. But I can definitely see people comparing the game in this aspect, even though I didn't really see anybody mentioning it. But at the end of the day, it seemed that players agree that Anthem and Avengers have good core gameplay, but you don't have diverse opportunities to enjoy it. That seems to be one of the main issues with the game. And so those are the details that I could discern from players and professional critics on why Anthem and Avengers are so similar. And did those other reasons win me over? Not necessarily. So I do think that there are similarities between these two games, but I don't think that Avengers is the next Anthem. If you like Anthem and enjoy the game, that's totally okay. I don't necessarily agree with the philosophies I've explained in this video. I just tried to explain what I think an investor or a company or a development team might think when their game is potentially underperforming. I tried to get my head in that perspective and explain what I think certain teams might value when looking at similar projects. And in my opinion, if we're talking about both games underperforming in the same ways, I think that one game is going to be salvaged over the other. I've never played Anthem before, but this has been my observations of the two games from the outsider looking in. In the end, this video has just been my best guess at what makes the two games different. I think that my opinion is valid to some extent, although I know that others might disagree. So who's right? Is Avengers the next Anthem? Well, I don't think there's any way for me to answer that honestly, unless I actually play the game. So with that in mind, I guess the best thing I can do is play Anthem and decide for myself. So I guess maybe I'll just do that next then. All right, so I guess I'll start playing Anthem today. And once I finish the game and I've played it for a while, I'll return back to my channel and decide once and for all whether I think Avengers is the next Anthem. So stay tuned for that, I guess. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. I want to thank you so much for watching. If for some reason you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and to subscribe to my channel for more. If you want to watch me play Avengers live, check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/carrotscraps, and all my other social media, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram is at carrotscraps as well. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you soon. I will give you this Anthem. The javelins look like they play very similarly to Iron Man. That's definitely one reason to call the games similar. Or the same. That was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to play Anthem, is because it looked like Tony Stark. But then Avengers came out, and I was like, oh, I don't need to play this.